Hello, everyone. This is Lala, and today I'm going to be talking about Big Brother 27. So, for the last two seasons, really, I've always done the review a month after the season has completely aired, but this season, clearly, it took me like over 2 months to do. And I think one of the reasons for that is I didn't really care for the season live at all. I found myself tuning out of many episodes. I was watching the feed, but I wasn't following or watching it as heavily as I was in the past year. So, and I just felt like something was off. Watching it now that I'm binging it, it definitely aged a bit better, but I still have a lot of issues with the season. One of the issues is that the cast is very top heavy. Outside of the likes of Rachel, Keanu, Nikki, Vince, Morgan, and arguably Ashley, mostly everyone else were either very nondescript, boring, bland, or just irritating as heck and offered very little to the table. And you could easily forget about them and nothing about the season would change. Compared to all the other casts in the new era, I do feel like this cast is the weakest since there's so many red t-shirts people in it. At the same time, the people that were very top heavy, they were interesting enough and they could carry the season in a lot of ways. To some people, definitely, but to me, not really. Another issue that I had with the season is that sorry, I knew this was going to happen last season when the blockbuster twist or the air arena it was called then was so well received. I knew that in the future they were just going to ruin it, where not only did they keep this twist longer than the 7 weeks that they did in last season, but they kept it all the way to the end game of Big Brother 27. So the last time it was used was in the final seven, and by then you're nominating at least half of the house, and it really just drags it out. And this counts for people like Kelly and Keanu to last much longer than they should have. It really took out a lot of the intrigue and things, and it made the game a lot more static. And you can definitely see how they're starting to weaponize this twist where it's kind of broken. I also continue to not like how long the pre-jury is and how the jury portion's only a month long, where they had to do a bunch of stupid twists to shorten it, like that white locust twist, which obviously was just awful, and then they did a double and all that jazz. While I do think, especially in the rewatch or when you're binging it, it's watchable enough, it's definitely not a high tier season, and I think I like it less than most people do, but I don't think it's the worst of the worst. So I am probably not going to go over what I think of the week, like whether it's good or bad in the beginning of each week, like I usually do. Week one really wasn't noteworthy anyways, but let's just get right into it. Kelly is a web designer who travels a lot because she was a farm girl and wanted to explore. Zach is a huge truck and a management consultant. He's essentially a match from last season from being a Asian, half Filipino specifically, Christian from Atlanta. Ashley is an attorney as she is a strategist in real life, is very boy crazy, and is the Black L word, which she will reference at the very end. Riley is a countryman who likes riding rodeo horses. Amy is an insurance agent and is a single mother of three. She's a huge fan of the show. It seems like they were setting her up to be a personality hire, but it didn't really pan out that way. Adrian is a carpenter who is a nerd and likes designing the competitions from Big Brother in his house. He did the over exaggerated superfan stuff that didn't actually actualize in the house. Lauren is a Louisianian Southern belle who's a bridal stylist and is playing the ditzy role despite being a superfan. She was clearly cast to be a showman's hire. Keanu is a fitness trainer but is a huge gamer as well. The first eight move into the house and there's already commentary about how loud and annoying Amy is. And Zach is already simping over Lauren. Catherine is a server and is a huge feminist, which is very ironic based on her role in this season, but it's clear that she's also a showman's hire. Vince is unemployed, living at his parents' house, and talks about the many jobs and sport spots that he has done over the years. Yeah, I think it did mention the sports he did over the years too. Mickey is an events curator and is also a countryside horse girl who is a huge social threat, and it's clear that she's a type A personality. Jamie is a huge super fan and was fired from his government job due to the current president. Morgan is a gamer, model, and a content creator who is very athletic. Zay is a salesman and is a former Mormon. He definitely gave Kyle vibes during the short time he was in the house, and who knows what mess he could have gotten into had he lasted longer. And he was a cheerleader. Well is a sports podcaster, has three daughters, and was in the military for 22 years. Ava is an artist who reads auras and is the black sheep who likes 60s go-go stuff. Mickey is crushing on Riley. Jamie is bonding with Amy. Seems like Zay and Keanu were building some sort of romance that fizzled out very quickly, and there's a timer that goes off. Julie has disappeared, and the first competition is that they have to find her. As you all know, I don't care to go into details about the competitions, but Zach does end up winning it, and due to this, he gets a secret veto that he could use in any of the ceremonies in the pre-jury. But he would have to give up the $10,000 that he got from winning this. Jamie ends up getting the HOH relic, which restores the HOH, and he gets the reward of choosing only four people who will play in the HOH competition. This is kind of a weak consolation prize, in my opinion. He picks himself, Adrian, Ashley, and Vince to play in the HOH. Vince ends up winning it, and we have Rachel as a 17th house guest, who will end up replacing someone as a saboteur like person is successful in their tasks. Okay, so it's weird that they brought a 17th house guest at all, and especially someone like Rachel, who is 2 eras removed from the show, instead of casting a more recent returning from either this era or the last era, who's never returned before. Oh, it's also announced that the BB blockbuster is a permanent part of the game, which was the AI blockbuster last season. And they'll definitely run this twist to the ground this season. Okay, so I'm not wasting time on this accomplice situation, which is a pseudo tour twist, anyways. But Amy is the accomplice. They should have known this due to Rachel being an extra woman. So obviously, if Rachel was going to replace someone, it was going to be a woman. We are finally getting to the roundtable intros, a third into the second episode. We have Jimmy shading Rachel, which will amount to nothing. Rachel gets immunity since they don't want to risk their solid vets being the first boot. And she chooses well. He picks Zach, and he picks Ava, since they are all have not, and I guess they are all immune too, if I remember correctly. Jamie is speaking to some of the women about Rachel, the ones who will inevitably and eventually cause his downfall, ironically enough, or coincidentally enough. Rachel tells the house, because most of them did not watch her seasons, about how she and her husband Brendan were on the block the first week and how they're still together a decade and a half later, since they haven't been apart this long ever, and this is the first time in the house without him. We see Jamie, Morgan, and Mickey plotting once again, so they are a trio that won't last at all, and they make an alliance together. Rachel and Amy are also getting very close. We have a segment of Ashley showering in Vince's atrium. It's taken an extremely long time, so this may have been exaggerated with how long it took. And the next day, Ashley ends up speaking to Catherine about it because Catherine's kind of spreading it around since she's the one telling people about it, and Catherine's just annoyed that she's even bringing it up. Who cares? We learn that Vince, Jimmy, Ashley, and Adrian made a deal with one another before the H competition to not target one another, and Jimmy is speaking to Vince about nominating one of the stronger guys. We then see Vince talking to Kelly about wanting to form a final two with her, and they do get that going. And Kelly ends up suggesting for Vince to nominate her because she saw Tucker do this bullshit last season, so she wants to replicate it. Vince has more conversations with people, and Ashley's name is coming up a lot. Zach warns Ashley that she needs to squash the situation, and she does crash Vince's atrium several times, but he's clearly not looking forward to speaking. Amy has a crying fit to Vince about Ashley being a target, and that obviously weirds him out. He ends up nominating Zay, Amy, and Ashley for eviction. Ashley calls Vince out for breaking their agreement, and he does his season-long Karen antics instead of taking any sort of accountability. She's crying her eyes out, and this conversation is really not going anywhere. But he lies and says that he will veto her just to shut her up, essentially. Amy is also very pissed off at Vince, and Rachel also names their duo the Mom Squad. I remember Alyssa naming her alliance with Helen this on Big Brother 15 too. They're showing generic Lauren and Zach stuff that I'm skipping. though they are probably dating now as I'm recording this, so I guess it wasn't for nothing. And we're getting generic Riley and Catherine stuff too that I'm also skipping, and we know for a fact that they're dating now. Piano talks to Rachel about his father having spinal cancer, and this is the start of their up and down relationship throughout the season. Jamie and Rachel are getting close and becoming aligned despite all the confessional talk that he did earlier. An alliance that forms between Jimmy, Zach, Rachel, Morgan, and Vince called the Heavy Haters, which was something that wasn't completely fake, but it wasn't completely real either. I also forgot that Riley ended up being in it, but because he was always doing his own thing, it's easy to forget that. We're starting to see Keanu's social game being less than stellar and the start of a romance between Zach and Zay. Ashley ends up winning the vetoes, and of course Vince is not thrilled that his target saved herself, and he has to make another nominee. Vince remembers that Kelly offered herself up as a pawn, and he realizes that this is his easiest route possible. Though there are so many other options, which just shows how grimy Vince is. Jamie is pushing for Vince to nominate Keanu since he wants a bro out, and he's also pushing this narrative to a bunch of other houses, which is just putting a bigger target on Jamie as he's just doing way too much. Riley tells Keanu this, and Jamie walks in during the middle of their conversation, which ends up going nowhere. Keanu tells this to Vince, which just annoys Vince, obviously, since it's clear Jimmy's trying to steamroll him. Keanu and Jimmy have a conversation. Jimmy doesn't lie about it well, and then it seemingly ends up being a Kubaya situation. But this pushes Keanu to push for Jimmy to go on the blog, and then this gets back to Jimmy, who then wants to come up with a rehearsed attack at the veto ceremony, which Keanu rightfully doesn't even entertain. Anyways, Ashley vetoes herself, and Kelly is named the replacement nominee. A lot of the screen time this week was given to Rachel, obviously because she's the only veteran. Production knows what they're working with her, but she really wasn't that involved in the ongoings of the week compared to what the edit made it look like. So it's really clear that they're just shooting her in unnecessarily because she's a production babe. We get the aftermath of the ceremony. We see Zay form a nice alliance with Vince, Zach, Will, and Riley that never really worked anywhere, and Zay is using a bunch of food analogies to describe them, which is just weird. We also get a segment of Kelly's bad social game, and she says a bunch of annoying comments that no one likes, and it's pissing people off. We are also starting to see the start of Rachel versus Zay, as the woman wants him out, and he tells Rachel that he will vote the people who voted him out this week if he stays. And Rachel tells him that he said she's going after her, and she'll behead him if he takes a shot. They continue arguing when they're in the house, and to be honest, it's a bit contrived, in my opinion, from both sides, but especially with Rachel's clearly rehearsed catchphrases. Kenny wins the blockbuster, and Zay ends up being evicted in a 9-5 vote. Honestly, Zay is not the worst first boot ever or one of the best. But I don't think he's just memorable overall. And he's not the worst or the best from a personality or a gameplay point of view. Overall, he was kind of just lukewarm, really didn't know anything about the show or game, and was just a bit aloof. Honestly, I think week two's a bit more lackluster and boring than the first week, which I wasn't crazy about to begin with. Zach is breaking down in front of the house, which is ridiculous since they had only been in the house for a week, and of course Rachel is happy. A bunch of the boys thought that they had the votes to get Amy out this week, mainly Kiana, bitter shows how out of the loop he is at this point and will continue to be for the rest of the season. And blames the incorrect votes on Will, though it was Riley who ended up flipping. Jamie wins the HOH, Mickey gets the power, which won't be relevant for another 2 weeks, and Kelly gains the final power. Jamie's asking everyone about who has the powers, and of course, everyone's denying it. Keanu also gets the power where an extra person, a mystery competitor, which is also an alumni, can play in the Vita competition for him. Keanu tells Kelly that he has the power, and she also tells him that she has the power, so they kind of just compare notes there. Though Kelly does end up telling Jimmy all this, which really just wasn't a good idea since it'll affect his nominations. Mickey tells Morgan about her power, which is to dethrone the other HOH and to take it over, as long as the dethroned HOH cannot guess who the person is. Jimmy wants to flush out all the powers, which is fair, so Kelly and Keanu are easy pawns, and Jimmy also sees Adrian or Riley as easy pawns as well. Jimmy nominates Kelly, Adrian, and Keanu for eviction. Jimmy tries yet again to create another moment with Keanu at the ceremony, and the latter snores from boredom, and it just fails from Jimmy's end. Adrian is bawling his eyes out about being nominated, and we have Rachel confronting Keanu about his vote last week, in addition to his power, where he denies both. There's a lot filler in this episode, since they decided to make the veto episodes an hour long this season, and it really drags the fuck out of things, and it's just not necessary at all. So I'm going to skip a lot of stuff with these middle of the week episodes, if that makes sense. Keanu releases his power, which causes another fight between him and Jimmy, where Keanu's actually fighting back at this point, but their back and forth is just old at this point. Ashley then decides to argue with him after the veto pick. I don't know why she decided to get into this, but I think it also shows another moment where she just inserts herself into things for no reason, and it's just ridiculous. Anyways, Casey posts the challenge retirement is the mystery house guest, and she does win the veto for Keanu. Anyways, there's a cameo from Felicia, which is nice, but Jimmy feels like, well, and Amy would be good finds. Though, allies like Rachel doesn't like this, so he thinks that they're more expendable than a lot of other people in the house. Even others that he isn't aligned with, which would backfire on him. Mickey and Morgan also doesn't like this move at all, and it starts a distrust between them. Rachel ends up getting into a fight with Keanu since he watched the highlights of hers on Big Brother 12, and I'm wondering if my compilation was one of those. Anyways, and he only talked about Hagen and Reagan meaning the fuck out of her, so she's insecure as hell. Whatever. Anyways, Kelly uses the power to compete in a competition later today, which is essentially another veto competition for herself. Anyways, Amy is nominated as the first replacement nominee, and after Kelly does save herself with the second veto, Jamie nominates Will as replacement nominee. Nikki and Morgan are visibly mad that Jimmy nominated two of their allies, and this anger will only get worse. Will thinks that he's a dead man walking since he cannot bond with the younger house guests in the house, and he complains about this for a while, which honestly gets annoying after a while. Amy thinks that she's in this position because of her relationship with Rachel, so she will throw her under the bus more and more throughout the week. You do have women like Catherine and Lauren wanting to boot Amy, since they're not close to the woman. I thought Catherine was a feminist, though. But they are closer to the men, and Lauren kind of wants to play the middle, though she never actually does that to see him because she doesn't build relationship with the other side of the house. Ever. It does like both sides are over Amy at this point for their own separate reasons, and people are debating about whether Will ends up staying if Amy wins the blockbuster against Adrian. Ashley tells Rachel that Amy is going, and Rachel isn't reacting well to it. So this big alliance that was formed last week, which is really fake at this point, is debating about who to keep, and Rachel is trying to campaign for Amy, but it's not working and no one is feeling it. Adrian wins the blockbuster and Amy is evicted in a unanimous 13-0 vote. Amy really was a non-factor in the season, and she really didn't vibe well with the cast at all. In a way, she was kind of like Annie regarding being a saboteur-like figure and then flaming out. She just never caught any traction, and it says a lot when both sides of the house are overused simultaneously. Arguably the most forgettable person in the season. Alrighty, so what I will say about week three is a bit more interesting and a bit more unpredictable than the last 2 weeks, and I think it's because there was a rogue agent who kind of won HOH and no one really knew what she was going to do. Anyways, Jimmy is pissed off that Amy rightfully called him a snake, and of course Rachel and Ashley are not thrilled with Amy leaving, but Jimmy is thrilled that two-thirds of the powers are flushed. Keanu is propping Adrian up for the both of them staying, but Adrian doesn't like him and isn't working with him. And he is salty for Keanu throwing Will under the bus pointlessly, and he's actively targeting Keanu, so it just shows how off Keanu is yet again. Rachel is talking about how much he likes Ava, which is very ironic, knowing what will happen between the two. Mickey and Morgan are still salty about Jimmy, and he walks in their conversation where they are pissed. And I never realized how frustrating his downfall ended up being with them, watching it back. In the H comp, we get cameos from the Nolan twins, which is shocking that they brought them back from 10 years ago. But Lauren ends up winning the H, and most people are wondering what the hell is going to happen with Lauren, of all people, being H. Vince is close to Lauren, so he feels good with her, but he warns her about people trying to sway her, while he ends up being the one who sways her. Mickey is salty about losing the HOH to Lauren and is contemplating about whether she should use her power or not. and Rachel is struggling with not being a competition beast this time around, since new Big Brother is a lot harder, especially with the competitions. Kiana's making his pitch to Lauren, and she is actively turning away from the conversation, which should have been a sign to him that he's going on the block, and she doesn't like him. Lauren does the exact same thing in her conversation with Ashley, and this will be a constant thing with Lauren freaking out about having to game to people she doesn't like, and just how weird she is about it. Kelly offers herself up as a pawn yet again, and Lauren is hoping that other people like Adrian and Will offer themselves up as pawn. Lauren nominates Keanu, Kelly, and Win for eviction, and Will is over it, which he will definitely not be quiet about. Will is still complaining about being nominated, and I was over his defeatist attitude at this point. There's so much filler because of the stupid hour and a half long episodes, really an hour long with the ads or without the ads. Like Morgan liking Zach, who likes Lauren, who doesn't like anyone. And it's crazy watching this with it being such an irrelevant thing compared to what Morgan will be known for interaction wise later on in the season. We're also seeing the start of Vince's strategy of promising people everything, which goes on to over promising, which will definitely work out for him at the end. Anyways, Keanu wins the veto and is panicking about having to. I'm another replacement nominee. Oh my gosh, it's scary. It seems like Ashley is up to be the replacement nominee. I don't remember how accurate this was in reality instead of it just being a convenient edit narrative. Vinny is pushing for Ashley to go up since he's still not over her reaction to him nominating her 2 weeks ago, and Rachel keeps on accidentally walking into their conversations. And this is around the time here where their feud starts. Rowan is leaning towards Adrian or Ashley, and after speaking to Rachel, essentially throwing Vince under the bus, which of course Lauren reports back to Vince. Pretty much, women like Mickey, Morgan, etc. speak to Lauren, who feels so scared to nominate Ashley. And I don't know if this is a microaggression or not. I really don't know. So, pretty much to continue nominating people who have already been nominated, Lauren is leaning towards Adrian. Keanu takes himself off the block, and Adrian is named the replacement nominee. Prince did not get his way this time, but is hoping that this kills the notion that he controls Lauren, and a decent amount of people are sad about Adrian being nominated. Katie feels like she's screwed at this point. Lauren and Catherine are fine with Will going home at this point, but they don't want to push it, which just explains their game all season. And Lauren is still hoping to hide in the middle after her age. Adrian is not taking the nomination well, and we have Morgan and Mickey ending up in an alliance with Zach and Vince because Morgan is trying to combine all of her alliances into one, which is rubbing Mickey the wrong way since she rightfully feels like a clear fourth was added onto it after the fact. It seems like the vote is going to be split, with half of the House voting well and Lauren being the tiebreaker, but she doesn't want to be the tiebreaker. We have a segment of Adrian with Brett because he has absolutely no personality and did absolutely nothing notable at the moment, and they needed something to identify him with. Since he's here, he's probably going. Anyways, Mickey running her mouth to Adrian about a penalty with Morgan, Zach, and Vince, which ends up getting back to them, and Morgan realizes that Mickey did too much and doesn't know how to handle it. So this is where things are starting to distance between them, but it's not really officiated yet. Anyways, with the tie situation, Vic and Zach do not want to draw the line in the sand, and Lauren does not want to break the tie. So, despite having to vote to keep Adrian, things don't align that way. Partially because Ava convinced Vic and Zach to vote to keep Adrian. Kelly wins the BB blockbuster again. I do think she goes home here if she did not win it. People, including Will, the other nominee, are crying because Adrian is on the block, but Adrian ends up getting evicted in an 8-4 vote. Whatever I said about Amy being the most forgettable person in this season, I take that back since I do think that is Adrian. He didn't do much on the show at all. He talked about honesty and not lying in a game about lying and deceit and strategy, and only caring about the competition element in a very sanctimonious way. And while people liked him, he never used that to form a social game, and his strategic reads were off. So he's just a prime example of another superman who's propping themselves up with this false persona in the preseason, only to completely flatline once they're in the house. So with the fourth week, it was definitely a mixed bag because I was annoyed at the utter stupidity in the gameplay, and I didn't really warm up to the cast yet. But I couldn't say that it's a predictable week, if that makes sense. So people are crying over Adrian's eviction, and Kelly is a bit salty at Vince for voting him out, where he does the same current antics to make up damage control. Of course, people like Riley are pissed off about Vince and Zach voting the way they did, but they would make up with Vince. But they do hold it against Zach, which obviously kind of starts his downfall there. They spend way too much time on the votes aftermath, but Riley does end up winning the HOH. But the competition does show how awful socially Kelly has been doing. Riley is looking forward to not going with the house this time, and there's this discussion about who has the last power in the house, which needs to be flushed out. It is speculated amongst the guys that it is either Ashley or Mickey, and of course this gets back to them via Zach telling them. This has Mickey debating on whether she should use the power, and Morgan is the only one who knows about the power, so Mickey speaks to her about it. Mickey tells Rachel about the power and everything that comes with it. So there's a plan to make it look like Ashley is the power holder so Riley can get it wrong. The power has been activated, and due to this, Riley is guessing that it is Ashley, and he's of course incorrect. Catherine decides to go after Ashley for laughing at Riley being in a stressful position. Rachel decides to defend Ashley, and now they're just going back and forth for no real reason. Anyways, Rachel goes on a warpath. Sorry. Sorry, I said Riley and I intertwined it with Rachel Riley. Anyways, Riley goes on a warpath against Mickey for using the power and dethroning him so she could become H. Riley continues arguing with Mickey after she tries to speak to him to apologize, but they go round and round in circles where she's told, or she mentions that she was told by someone, I believe it was Zach and Vince, that he was going after her, which of course Riley denied and was lying about it. Anyways, we have more sad Catherine and Riley content that I don't care about, and Rachel explains to her other allies why Mickey didn't tell them. And Jimmy says that he's annoyed, but he's fine with it. So he's safe and he's going to let it go. And pretty much, Mickey is thinking about a combination of Riley, Catherine, Kiana, and Kelly to get nominated. Anyway, mm, Mickey and Riley make up, and she's not going to talk to him this week, though she should have, but she wants him to be a pawn to win the veto over Kiana. She does her HOH talks with the other people in the house, and she's not forgetting about Keanu taking her out of the HOH competition. And the nominations are Keanu, Kelly on her birthday, and Riley for eviction. There's so much filler, but Jimmy mentions that he made a fake alliance with Kelly and Keanu, so they won't go after him, which will end up biting him in the butt. Anyways, Mickey wants Kelly to stay on the block so she can beat Keanu in the blockbuster. And of course, Kelly does not like that because it doesn't benefit her at all. Anyways, Keanu ends up winning the veto with the entire house being silent, and he picks a fight with Ava, who's supposed to give him the veto next to this, and because she didn't congratulate him quick enough as the host of the competition. Anyways, the worst case scenario happened for Mickey, and she has to create a new target and a replacement nominee. Ricky has a very soft spot for Riley for some reason, so she's not going to put up Catherine, though it makes sense for her to do so. Rachel asks Mickey about sending home Vince, who's playing all sides, and Mickey does hint to Vince that she's considering nominating him, as she still feels a way about Zach, Vince, and Morgan already having an alliance and bringing her into it afterwards. They try to make it look like Vince convinced Mickey to go after Jimmy, though she and Morgan were already feeling a way about him, which we clearly saw in the show, and they did not show a conversation with Keanu and Mickey about Jimmy. That happened before this, where I believe it was him revealing the alliance between Jimmy, Keanu, and Kelly. Morgan and Mickey talk about this, and they're tired of Jimmy playing offside, where she pushes back against Vince being nominated, which causes some distance between the two of them eventually. Essentially, Morgan pushed for Jimmy to be nominated because she wanted to save Vince, though for Mickey's game, it doesn't make sense to target Jimmy at all. Honestly, they both should have pushed for Catherine to go up, where they would have kept both of their eyes, but they weren't thinking that way. Anyways, Morgan and Mickey tell Jimmy 15 minutes before the veto meeting starts. Obviously, Keanu saves himself, and Jimmy's named the replacement nominee. A lot of her allies, i.e., Will, Ashley, and Rachel, are not supportive of Mickey's move, and there's a lot of nasty behavior from Mickey that wasn't shown on the episodes, and kind of Morgan too, while the other side is happy about it, or what exists of it. Mickey and Jimmy finally have a conversation, though the show have happened a few days ago. Anyways, there's not a whole lot that's happening at this point, since Jimmy's kind of just a dead man walking. But Mickey's game is officially starting to go down, but it's clear that, like I said, Jimmy is going home without the blockbuster. Riley wins the blockbuster, and Jimmy is evicted in a 9-2 vote. I think that as a personality, Jamie was very much a tryhard with orchestrating fights and trying to create several moments, and none of them ever really landing. And he was a bit too meta for my liking. I don't think he's a bad person at all, but was a bit too contrived, and he did a bit too much with his HOH and trying to cover all of his tracks, which brought much unnecessary distrust with his allies. And I think due to him being so performative and doing too much and not having any subtlety caused him to be in early boots. So week 5 was another week that I didn't really care that much for, but the really stupid decision made at the end was something that not even I saw coming. So, anyways, Rachel's freaked out because she was begging everyone to keep Jimmy, though clearly that didn't work. And Ashley tried to change her role after she already made it, and Julie shut that shit down. Pretty much everyone is shocked that there are two votes, with Ashley denying it, though everyone kind of knows that it's her. Anyways, Ava wins the HOH without doing much of anything. It's one of those competitions where you target people to answer two questions or whatever, and then it's kind of just that being bong forth. And no one really targeted her. Anyway, she's telling a bunch of people, including Zach, that they are fine and aren't going on the block. Ava does speak to Mickey and mentions that Vinny, Keanu, and Ashley are the ones that she is looking at as nominees. And of course, Mickey does not like one of those names, i.e., Ashley. Skipping through the Catherine and Riley stuff, and Vince tries to make a pitch to Rachel so she can make it to Ava in his defense, and she sees right through it and him. He does the caring crying to Rachel and Will. I'm glad neither one of them gives a single fuck. Of course, this reports back to Ava, who claims that he never spoke game to her, and Will throws out Zach's name as a nominee. And pretty much, Will did this because he's salty that Zach, who was an ally of his, targeted him in the H8 competition. And Ava does end up nominating Vince, Zach, and Keanu for eviction. Of course, Vince and Zach aren't happy with being nominated, but Zach specifically isn't taking it well, since it doesn't make sense to him, and Ava went out of her way to promise him that he wasn't going on the block. He knows that he has his power, but he does not want to give his $10,000 to someone who blinded him. Remember this for later. And Vent is speaking to Mickey and Morgan, but Mickey is silent because her hands are in these nominations, despite being aligned to Zach and Vince, which Morgan outright sees through. We have more complaints from Vince, Zach, and Morgan about Mickey being in the alliance, but she's the only person that Ava spoke to about her nomination, so everyone kind of knows that, yeah, Mickey's looking funny. Vance and Ashley are weirded out by Morgan because she's complaining too much. Sorry, Well and Ashley are weirded out by Morgan because she's complaining too much about Vance and Zach being on the block. And they do report this back to Mickey, as Morgan wants to target Ava now. And of course, Mickey reports this back to Ava, who is thinking about nominating Morgan, though that wasn't what Mickey was trying to do. Catherine is suddenly getting screen time, which is odd, and she ends up winning the veto. Oh, so that's why she got screen time. So we don't really have situations like Keanu redoing Vince while on the block, which is what he was suggesting earlier. Rachel is salty that people like Morgan, Mickey, Zach, and Vince talked about how they want to make Rachel the first juror, and she's very salty about this because she has a family that she left to do this for. And Rachel does snap at Morgan about this, and it's ironic because she's the first juror on her first season, and she ends up being that this season anyways. I do remember that Rachel was pitching to go home this week because she knew that she had no chance to win, but of course they didn't show any of that. So Catherine predictably doesn't use the veto, but the bigger shock is that Zach did not use the veto that he got on the first day. So Zach is trying to create the narrative that he didn't use his power because he didn't want Morgan to be nominated, but it's really because he did not want to give his money to Ava. Ava is annoyed with Zach's attitude since being nominated, so she's more than fine with him going home, and Mickey keeps on saying I in a conversation with Ashley and a bunch of other people on the feed, so they only just show this conversation on the episodes. But Mickey really isn't coming up for that. Whatever is on the other side, or whomever is on the other side, is more than fine with getting rid of Zach. And I think it just shows the difference between Zach's social game and Vince's social game, despite them doing a lot of the same things. Mickey tells Zach that he will go home if he's against Vince, and Zach knows that he's screwed up, and he's literally bawling in front of Mickey, who doesn't give a fuck. Morgan is still salty about Zach liking Lauren while she has a crush on him, so she does want to keep Vince over Zach. Zach does tell Morgan about his power that he didn't use to try to get her to vote with him, or vote on his side, and this blows her away, but it doesn't really change much. Kiana wins the blockbuster and Zach is evicted in an 8-2 vote. It seemed like Zach had so much potential in the game, and he was doing well for the first 3 or so weeks. But there are definitely some holes in his game. He was way too passive strategically and had a lot of surface level relationships, so he overestimated his social relationships, and he made a huge blunder with his power. As a personality, he really wasn't interesting at all and will only be remembered for his Marcellus move, but less iconic. But at the same time, he would have stayed had Keenan not won the blockbuster, but oh well. So with week 6, I do think it's arguably the most interesting week of the entire season, but that doesn't really say a whole lot because clearly the standard isn't very high, anyways. Of course, people are reacting to Zach's eviction, and despite many people crying, they all saw Vince as more valuable, and there's just a lot of weeping and more discussion of the two outlier votes at this point. Mickey is ranting about how Keanu and Rachel need to go home, and this is rubbing her allies the wrong way, especially about Rachel needing to go home. Anyways, Rachel shoots Keanu down about them working middle, and she outright tells him that there is no middle side, and she knows that even her allies are targeting her, i.e., Mickey and Morgan. Anyways, Rachel went to the HOH, and people like Mickey, Morgan, and Vince are uber worried as they all were targeting her, and they have some distance there, especially with the whole Jimmy move, and Rachel just not liking Vince. Ashley and Weldy feel safe with Rachel, but they think that their allies did way too much. And Ashley completely sells Morgan out to Rachel. We do see Rachel trying to pull in Kelly as an ally, but it really doesn't go well. And Mickey has a conversation with Rachel, and the conversation is awkward as hell, since Rachel's still mad at Mickey for sending Jimmy home unnecessarily. They have another conversation where Mickey wants Rachel to be direct with her, since Kelly told her that Rachel feels iced out by her. So Rachel knows that Kelly essentially ratted her out. Rachel does nominate Vince, Morgan, and Mickey for eviction. Mickey is crying because Kelly told her, "Welcome to the party," about being on the block and hugging her at the ceremony. And Mickey is breaking up because she paid for Rachel to be HOA. And she's acting like she wasn't targeting her, but how dare Rachel get mad over me, i.e., Mickey, sending Jimmy home? It's clearly just showing a more delusional side of Mickey where there's just no accountability whatsoever. Morgan admits to Rachel that she would have nominated her but not targeted her, which isn't the best decision for Morgan to outright admit this, especially after being nominated. Anyways, Ashley has a conversation with Rachel, and she doesn't know that there's toilet paper attached to her clothes, which is kind of just a funny scene. We're getting Riley and Cass stuff, which I don't give a crap about, despite him going home this week. And there's just a lot of dysfunction between the two of them that wasn't shown, especially with the way that he spoke to her, and it just came off very creepy on the feeds. Lauren wins the veto, which is a given since she started getting screen time for the first time since her HOH 3 weeks ago. And of course, Vince is happy, so he is going to say and do anything to give Vince one of his final twos to use the veto on him. Rachel obviously does not want the veto to be used, and Morgan is trying to use Zach as a bond or to bond with Lauren conveniently. And Rachel is hilariously cock blocking this conversation. Lauren speaks to Rachel, who tells her that she will put up Riley as a nominee if Lauren uses the veto, and she continues to block Lauren's conversations with the nominees. Rachel is snapping at Morgan and Vince for trying to manipulate Lauren into using the veto. They deny it, though it just seems like Rachel's flipping out because she's not getting what she wants, with Lauren not caring about one of her allies being nominated as a replacement nominee. Anyways, Lauren uses the veto on Vince, and like promised, Rachel nominates Riley as the replacement nominee. Of course, certain people are not happy that Riley was put up, and Lauren is freaking out about how she's scared. And Catherine is very pissed off because her boo is on the block. She needs to blame Lauren for this. Kelly and Kiana are also not happy, and Rachel is hoping that the shot is taken, and Mickey thinks that she has the votes to stay. She does not. Vince does his usual with overpromising with Morgan and Riley that he has their votes, but Mickey winning the blockbuster will screw him over. LOL, based on what happens. Mickey is campaigning to Catherine about the vote, and Morgan sees this because she did the same thing with Mickey about using like beads. I don't think they were like candy or whatever when it comes to strategizing about the house. So the trust between Morgan and Mickey is broken here. Mickey is making a bunch of weird comments, like Ashley being all over Rachel's HOH, and she's been making these weird comments over the last 2 weeks at this point. Morgan and Ashley compare notes about Mickey, and everyone is comparing notes on her game, so she essentially has no one at this point. While they are bashing Mickey, Will, Ashley, Morgan, and Rachel and Vince, who enters the room, forms an alliance called the Judges, which will be very important from here on out. None of this matters since Mickey wins the blockbuster and Riley is evicted in a 5-4 vote. Riley came off as relatively monotonous and middle of the road on the edits, but he was very unlikable and disturbing on the feeds. I did not care for his romance with Catherine. He kind of isolated himself from a lot of people that actually wanted to work with him. I do think he had a lot of people wanting to work with him due to his white male privilege, but he never capitalized on it. So, yeah. Week 7 is fine. Not one of the best, not one of the worst weeks. So, of course, Catherine's not reacting well to the last elimination or eviction, my bad. And even Mickey is crying about it. I don't know why Mickey thought that she was so close to Riley, and it was the closest vote of the entire season. Vince decided to vote with his new alliance, and he told Keanu where the votes were going. But, of course, Keanu didn't believe it. Ava is freaking out because she really did not want to keep Morgan and kind of resents Rachel for forcing this. Vince is breaking down because he voted against the people that he actually likes. Vince can't be a rat and actually has to get blood on his hands. Mickey is ranting about Riley going home, annoying Will, Ashley, and Rachel even more because she's discounting Morgan, and it's also weird because Mickey was safe and it makes it seem like she wants Morgan to go. And of course, Catherine is plotting against Rachel. Vance wins HOH where he really didn't need to, and he thinks of Mickey being a pawn with Keanu, and the latter sells Rachel under the bus to Vince as a nominee, since she nominated Vince last week. He speaks to Morgan, and she also talks about Mickey talking to people like how Mickey regrets keeping her, and she's more than fine with Mickey going home this week. Everyone pretty much agrees that Mickey needs to go home, and Vince tells Mickey that she had an influence in Ava nominating him and Zach, which is definitely true. And Mickey doesn't like that a supposed ally is nominating him. Vince is trying to get Rachel to agree with being a pawn, but of course Rachel doesn't agree to it since she knows better. And Kiana tells him to not fall for Rachel's crap. Vince tries to get Kelly to go on the block, and she is not here for it, since he stabbed her in the back countless times. And I'm kind of glad that Kelly picked up on this and remained consistent after this, unlike some other people Vince was allied with, who he kept on screwing over. Vince really wants to nominate Rachel, but his allies convince him not to. But he ends up nominating Mickey, Ava, and Kelly for eviction. So Mickey rants about being dumb for keeping Vince 2 weeks ago, and Morgan is denying that she had any input in this. And of course, Morgan is lying her ass off in this conversation, and she's confused as to why she is up, but she's giving Morgan that smoke essentially. But Mickey's actions are pretty much crazy, and it justifies why she's up. But of course, no one's going to say that to Mickey's face. Vince is lying to Kelly about backdooring Rachel and using the veto on her, and she knows that he is lying. Progress for Kelly, at least. Catherine and Lauren know that they don't have many people anymore, and Catherine just doesn't trust nor like Rachel at all, so she wants to get her out. Vince and Mickey have their talk where she mentions that after multiple opportunities to get him out, she didn't even hesitate about keeping him, but he sees through her tactics. Since he does the same Karen tactics, and he admits that he does the same tactics that Mickey is doing to him right now. Morgan is speaking to Vince about if the veto is used, nominating someone like Catherine is the safest thing. Mickey wins a veto, which the entire house is not thrilled about, so they're pretending to be happy for her to her face. Vince is panicked because he has to make another nominee, and his target saved herself, and Lauren is trying to get Rachel up, which Morgan sees through, hence her staying in the room. And Lauren sees through Morgan trying to prevent her from going up. Vince throws Keanu under the bus to Rachel, which does piss her off, and she confronts Keanu about it, and she realizes that he's telling the truth. Keanu then goes to Vince, and all of this is just ridiculous. Though I do think production might have had a hand in Rachel not going up this week. Anyways, Kelly noticed Rachel's sour attitude at Lauren's birthday. Yeah, I think it was Lauren's birthday, and Ashley reports it to Rachel, so she confronts Kelly briefly about not wanting a hug from her, and she's just very awkward. We do have some last minute campaigning to Vince from Rachel and Keanu, causing for some bickering between the two of them. Anyways, none of this matters because Vince nominates Catherine after Mickey vetoes herself. Catherine and Ava are assured that they're going to be safe as long as Kelly is on the block. And for some reason, Lauren refuses to distance herself from Vince as he nominated all of her allies this week. Kelly is very pissed off because she sees how little Vince cares about her and he wants her gone. because she's responding to his behavior. That's why he wants her gone. Keanu and Rachel are arguing about dishes for some reason, and it's clearly just a leftover for him trying to get her nominated. Keanu then decides to yell at Vince for doing what he wants, and all Vince has to do is put on his Karen tears, and Keanu then changes his mind, since his heart is telling him to stick with Vince, despite all the evidence proving the contrary. And I think I know why Keanu acts like this, and I think it's due to some of the isms. I'll just leave it at that. Rachel is pitching that Kelly needs to stay since she is so bad at the game, while Catherine has some allies. Lauren is speaking to people not in her alliance to feel the vote and is always trying to keep Catherine over Ava, who is sleeping, actually not sleeping, overhearing this entire conversation. But this doesn't really go anywhere. But Lauren does realize that she done fucked up. I feel like that this is to attempt to make it look like Ava was in danger when she really wasn't. Catherine pitches to Rachel, something that she doesn't like at all, but she has no other ground to stand. Kelly wins yet another blockbuster, and Catherine is evicted in a 7-1 vote. Catherine was pretty forgettable all around as a person and a player this season. She had that fight with Rachel, but there really wasn't much else. She was very passive as a player and was not involved in many alliances or strategies happening, as she wasn't a big personality either. She just didn't make as many mistakes as many others in the season, so she's kind of just a middle of the road or slightly middle of the road player overall, though she was the prime example of a pawn who went home. A lot about this week kind of seemed repetitive, but it wasn't one of the worst weeks either. But at the same time, maybe I'm just feeling this because the pre-jury and the blockbuster twist is so effing long, but I'm kind of just over it. Anyways, everyone's reacting to Catherine's eviction, and Rachel is ranting about how Kelly should have went 3 weeks ago against Jimmy, since she's great at puzzles. She was the target last week, but she just won. I do agree they should have voted Kelly out then. And Vince, yet again, has to do damage control with Rory, because clearly her ass won't pivot whatsoever. Kelly realizes that she kind of needs to stick with Keanu, and he decides that he needs to work with Rachel now. So he's doing some damage control, but she accepts it because she knows that she's at the bottom of her judges' alliance. Keanu wins HOH, and he wants to target Morgan for influencing Vince last week, and if he needs to go up soon, that is fine. He tells Rachel that he won't nominate Ashley due to her, despite Ashley annoying the hell out of him, and she's annoyed that she has to kiss his ass all week. Mickey mentions too well that Rachel is kikiing with Keanu when they're in the washroom, and Ashley doesn't believe what um, Rachel is saying about her being spared this week. Morgan and Vince are hoping that Mickey will go home since it means that their entire alliance will stay in the house. Keanu tells Vince that he wants Morgan gone, so he has to go home because he will veto her. Vince pulls out the Karen tears yet again, and seems like Keanu isn't buying it this time. I am shocked. But Vince is reporting this back to Morgan. Ava is told that there's a good chance that she's going on the block, and Mickey's told that she's going on the block too. Vince has another talk with Keanu, who calls him out for being responsible for 3 of their allies going home. But yet Keanu does not ditch Vince whatsoever, which is very annoying. Keanu nominates Morgan, Vince, and Mickey for eviction, essentially replacing Rachel's nominations from 2 weeks ago. And I think this is why I kind of felt a lot of repetitiveness with this week. Morgan knows that she's the target from his speech, and Vince regrets not taking that to Rachel. And Mickey thinks that she has people fighting for her, though some of her former allies are somewhat warming up to her again, but they're not going to vouch for her. Keanu has his post-noms chats, and I do think it's gross how he's doing the "this girl is tainting my guy, so I want to send the girl home so I can revamp him." It's just bullshit. Keanu's going around asking people to veto Vince if they win, and at least Kelly realizes that Vince isn't shit, and she won't be doing that if she wins the veto. We get a segment of how close Morgan and Vince are getting, despite him having a girlfriend of 7 years. Ava walks in on Morgan rubbing his arm, and the other house guests are talking about it. Mickey is delusional enough to think about leaving the nominations the same if she wins the veto, since she thinks that she has the votes to stay. No, she clearly does not. Angela hosts the veto competition, where Morgan wins the veto, which is Kiana's worst case scenario. Kiana already mentioned that there's a good chance that Ashley will be the replacement nominee, and Rachel wants to push him to nominate Lauren. Rachel tries buttering Keanu up, but he tells her that either Ava or Ashley are the options as the replacement nominee, and Ashley tells Keanu that he will be in her crossfire if he puts her up. Though mentions that he would be an option if she was HOH, which, not the best move, but pretty much she's reminding him of the promise earlier in the week. I forgot about how there's an entire scheme of Keanu and Vince to try to get Morgan to use the veto on him. And Vince's Karen self, sorry, and Vince's Karen self does use this tactic, but thankfully Morgan has enough sense and doesn't buy it. Rachel mentions that he can nominate Ava, and he brings up Ashley's threat to him in their conversation to kind of justify his move. Morgan vetoes herself, and Ashley's named the replacement nominee, where she gives off a scripted ass speech that really didn't land, in my opinion, calls him out for his promise, and essentially states that he is a narcissist. So the fight with Ashley and Keanu continues, where Rachel decides to bandwagon and tag team him, where it really just wasn't a good look. He's relatively monotonous in this, while they continue to go crazy, knowing how it will look, but Rachel is pretty much over Keanu at this point. Mickey feels like she has to win the blockbuster, especially after how much Rachel rolled for Ashley, and she's kind of on her own. Tiana throws Rachel under the bus to Ava about Rachel wanting her to go up, and this gets brought up, causing the three I mentioned earlier to fight yet again. Ashley calls him out for having no social game, and Tiana says that Ashley has done nothing all season and she's trying to get while Rachel is yelling to bait him, or at least that's according to Will. The nominees are doing their last minute campaigning, but Vince wins the blockbuster and Mickey goes home in a 6-1 vote. Nikki came off like two completely different people from her first half and her second half of the game, with her HOH being the biggest change. Her ego became huge during her HOH itis, and a few weeks afterwards, she just made so many poor game and social moves. But when she was doing well, she was doing really well. So she's a mixed bag as a player, but she was an interesting, unique character. But you could tell that her time was coming to an end, and she wasn't even that interesting by her final week. Week 9 is easily the worst week of the entire season. Obviously, the Locust twist is just really, really, really stupid because it's essentially a challenge purge. And by anyone who doesn't know what it is, a challenge purge is essentially a daily on the challenge where you have to perform and the last place people get eliminated. And that's essentially what this is. I don't watch Big Brother to watch a challenge purge. And even outside of that, everything that happened after it was just really, really, really boring, muting. You can tell that the cast wasn't into it. They're complaining about the twist the entire week, and they're essentially just lethargic. Of course, everyone is happy to make it to the jury portion. The judges are solid lines. Kelly thinks that her, Lauren, and Keanu are a side of the house, and Lauren, in her opinion, Ava is just there. We have a white locust twist, and it's announced that someone will be eliminated tonight. Keep in mind, Mickey just left a few hours ago at this point, and it will be based on competitions. Tyler is hosting the twist slash competition, where they will have to do it individually, and whomever wins this competition will win safety for the night. Ava ends up winning safety for the twist, and she has to wait a few minutes to send someone to compete in the next comp, where that person will have 6.5 minutes to compete in. If they fail to do so, they will be evicted. If the person is successful in doing so, they can choose someone else to send in, but it will take a minute less. So the second person will have 5.5 minutes, then so on and so forth, and yeah. And the person who does this part the fastest will be HOH, and the person who fails to get it done on time will be eliminated. Rachel and Keanu are pitching for Ava to be chosen first, and Ava does not like that Rachel essentially pulled her into a room as she felt it was a violent boundary. She chooses Vince. He succeeds, and he chooses Lauren to convince her to pick Morgan afterwards, which of course annoys Morgan. Lauren wants Morgan to pick Kelly if she picks her, but she senses Morgan's hesitance, but she lets Vince trick her. Morgan picks Rachel to compete as after Morgan is successful, and obviously Lauren's successful too, but Rachel does not succeed in it, causing her to be eliminated and to be the restorer again. To be honest, I didn't really get Rachel's inclusion in the season as she was a vet from 2 eras ago. It wasn't like she was around a bunch of people who knew her, but it did seem like she matured not only as a player but as a person. She did have some entertaining moments, and you can tell which ones were genuine and which ones were hammed up, so that was kind of eh. It does suck that she went home based on losing a competition, and I do get everyone's frustration with it. At the same time, I think a lot of people would not have been as upset if it was anyone else but her who lost it. But yeah, Rachel's inclusion wasn't the worst thing ever, even though I found it to be very confusing. Lauren ends up winning the HOH as she got it done the fastest, and Morgan is not feeling Vince since he picked Lauren over her. And that is one of the reasons why Rachel is gone. But it is also why another one of her or their allies will end up going home this week, and she's worried that it will be her. Lauren tells Vince that she's not putting up Kelly or Ava, which good for her, and she does not want to work with Morgan, despite Vince trying to keep her safe. And he just genuinely wants to bring Lauren to the final two at this point over Morgan. Keanu is sad that Rachel is gone, and I don't give a single fuck. Lauren and Ava are talking about working together, and Lauren wants to send home one of Morgan or Keanu. Lauren nominates Morgan, Will, and Ashley for eviction. Morgan knows that she's the target if she stays on the block, and Vince is claiming that he's going to use the veto on her. But no one, even he, knows that if that's actually true. Morgan does speak to Lauren, but there's not much happening here, despite Vince telling her that it would be Keanu who would be in trouble. It's clear that some people are getting tired of Morgan at this point, and Lauren is getting cagey with Morgan about whether or not the veto will be used. So she knows that she's in trouble. None of this really matters since Morgan wins her second veto. It's clear that Keanu is going up, and there's not much to discuss anyways. He's trying to get Vince into volunteering instead and guilting Lauren into not putting him up because he did not nominate her last week, so it's clear that Lauren never saw him as an ally, so she doesn't care. Morgan takes herself off the block, and Keanu is named the replacement nominee. Morgan is insecure about Vince's relationship with Lauren, and there really isn't anything going on at this point in the week. A lot of the cast was just bashing the right roll kiss twist, and I don't blame them. They had Rachel come back a week after she was eliminated to do her eviction interview with Julie, and it was just very odd to watch, since clearly she already had time to internalize and have her own viewpoints since she was so distant from the situation. So we do see more Morgan and Vince melodrama, as well as some more Kiana campaigning. Anyways, Kiana predictably wins the blockbuster, which should not still be going at this point, and Will is evicted in a 3-2 vote. Will was definitely more tolerable than many of the other older father/men archetype that has been on this specific era, and he had a better social game too. At the same time, he was way too passive for a lot of the season as a player, and he's also going to be one of the main forgettable people from the season once we distance ourselves more and more from it. It also did not help that he essentially gave up during his final week in the house so Ashley could stay. I actually found week 10 to be pretty interesting of a week, but says a lot since we're pretty much nearing the end game and the blockbuster still exists. And let's just get to it. I don't know why they still have the blockbuster competition happening so late in the game, which just makes things drag more and more. And essentially, half of the house is going to be on the block, which is just ridiculous. So, Lauren, Ava, and Kelly are kind of working together, and Vince has his judges plus Lauren as allies. Keanu is still pissed off at Lauren, but we do have a Vince and Morgan segment where the house guests are talking about how Vince is emotionally cheating on his girlfriend of 7 years with Morgan. They are always hugging one another, and it just looks very off. Callie is reporting to Vince about the comments Keanu made about it, and even Zingbot, who came in, made a zing about it. Keanu does tell Vince that his friendship with Morgan does kind of come off as some sort of affair, and the other house guests are talking about it. Anyways, Vince wins HOH again, and Morgan and Ashley know that they need to convince Vince to nominate Lauren, since she will veto Kelly or Ava if she wins the veto and is not nominated, which, yeah, makes sense. Keanu also agrees with the sentiment, as they are talking about how Lauren has never been nominated throughout the season. Vince is not over Keanu nominating him and then claiming that he's cheating on his girlfriend with Morgan, so he's going to nominate Keanu for sure. Morgan is making her pitch for Lauren to go up since she will be safe, and also this might be the last chance to break her never nominated streak. So she can't use that as an argument if Lauren's in the final two. And when Vince tells Lauren that she's going up, of course she isn't happy about it. Vince nominates Ava, Kelly, and Kenna for eviction, so Vince doesn't end up nominating Lauren. Yet, Morgan, of course, does not like these nominations since he's prioritizing Lauren over her, so of course she confronts him about it, and Vince does his typical rat Karen response. But Morgan is giving him an ultimatum this time. Ava overheard Keanu and Ashley talking about Vince putting Lauren up as a replacement, so she tells Lauren this, and Lauren confronts Vince about it. Morgan wins her third consecutive veto and is thinking of taking Keanu off the block, the only person who's the biggest shield in her. Essentially, Morgan is able to wear Vince down in putting Lauren up, so she takes Ava off the block here, and Vince nominates Lauren as a replacement nominee. Vince is under the assumption that Lauren is being safe or she is safe, and is annoyed that he felt the pressure to put her up. But Morgan and Ashley is telling him that she needs to actually play the game now. Lauren needs to play the game now. So both women are definitely planning on sending Lauren home. Lauren is calling Vince crazy for thinking that Ashley and Morgan are going to keep her, which fair. And Morgan enters the room to tell them that this is Morgan enters the room and Vince says that this is his ideal final three. So Morgan doesn't like the comment and Lauren isn't thrilled of the idea at all. His plan is to send Kelly out, but people are moving more and more towards Lauren, and we have some more Vince and Morgan arguing since she's not over his comment about them having a final three. It's just ridiculous and so melodramatic. Morgan's literally in the shower in the HH room and is continuing to arguing with Vince. Kelly and Lauren can hear them outside. They're trying to knock the door so they can stop it, but they tell the two to pretty much screw off so they can continue arguing. It's just so melodramatic. Anyways, Lauren wins the final blockbuster of the season, and Kelly is evicted in a 3-2 vote, where Vince had to break the tie. Kelly was definitely very weird and stuck out like a sore thumb on the season in more than one way. She was never in the majority alliance at all, barely in any sort of alliance. She rubbed people the wrong way from the very beginning, and would have been one of the very first few booted without the elongated blockbuster twist. It's unfortunate that her trying to beat Tucker ended up working, but she outlasted him by a lot in the season. Art is a double eviction figure since there's only 2 weeks left of the season. And there's still 7 people at the beginning of the week. And Morgan wins the HOH, where she nominates Lauren and Keanu for eviction. Keanu wins the veto, obviously using it on himself, and Morgan names Ava as the replacement nominee. Lauren is evicted in a 2-1 vote. The annoying thing is that Lauren could have been a good player. She is unthreatening, had some decent reads at times, wasn't disliked at all, and I can see her making it far on most seasons, and she's good at comps. The issue is that she's way too passive of a player and refused to expand her horizons, especially when Vince burned her time and time again, and she never really built any sort of bonds with anyone else that could have been advantageous for her. It also annoyed me how she barely spoke above a whisper, and she's one of the most boring people to be on Big Brother ever. Okay, so with week 11, there's not a whole lot to talk about. It's a rushed endgame week. It's pretty standard. We see Ava making a final two with Ashley as they do want to split up Vince and Morgan, and we see more brown nosing from the cast before they figure out who the HOH. But they are told that the eviction votes will be done differently this round, and the nomination ceremony will be done differently. Vince wins another HOH, which no one but Morgan is happy about, and most of the others are hoping that anyone but Vince or Morgan wins the veto, so she can be put up and sent out of the house. Vince is being told that he needs to cut Morgan, so she has a chance to win. So he has a chance to win, and Vince, of course, tells Morgan this. Keanu loses his mind when Vince tells him that he isn't nominating Morgan, but we do have a different setup for nominations, where it will be done by voodoo dolls. Of course, Vince nominates Ava and Keanu for eviction. Keanu is salty about Vince nominating him, and because he's under the impression of Vince being his final, or in his final two or three. Vince obviously doesn't want Keanu anywhere near the end, and I don't feel bad for that at all. Morgan wins her fourth veto. Keanu is ranting to Vince about how his game is over and how everyone are dumbasses, which, no, it's the other way around. Everyone gets to see video messages from their families, and Vince is shocked that he did not get a message from his girlfriend, wondering if he was dumped by his girlfriend, which he was. No matter what campaigning Keanu does, nothing works as Morgan does not use the veto, and he's evicted via voodoo dolls in a unanimous 2-0 vote. Honestly, Keanu rubs me the wrong way with the way he spoke to people, how he preferred certain people over others, and the fact that he made it this far mainly due to the blockbuster twist and competitions annoyed the hell out of me, but mainly due to the blockbuster twist. At the same time, he is a very unique casting choice. There is no one like him in Big Brother history, and I see why the cast was like him, though a part of that had to do to his underdog edit. He's one of the few men on the season who wasn't a complete dud. Morgan wins the HOH, so she's automatically going right to the finale. The finale, my bad. Of course, Vince is worried because he knows that he's a goner if the other two women win the veto, and Ava and Ashley are hoping to win the veto, while also doing the campaigns to Vince, mentioning that he is playing Morgan's game. Morgan nominates Ava and Ashley for eviction, and she also wins the final veto of the season. pushing for Vince to boot Ava so they can have a judges' final three. Due to this, Vince votes to evict Ava. It seemed like Ava was doing really well for the first few weeks and then convinced Vince and Zach to boot Adrian. But her refusal to talk game caused her allies to make alliances that didn't include her, and she did not use her HOH well, as she was left on the sidelines to be picked off for the second half of the season. I do think she became too contrived as a character after a while, despite seemingly being somewhat endearing at first. So, regarding the final week, it's one of the better finales, especially of the last few seasons. Anyways, Morgan wins part one of the final HOH. Frankie's hosting part two. They did something where the Lotus person is revealed to be well or whatever. Who cares? And Ashley wins part two of the final HOH. Vince has a full blown meltdown after losing part two because he misread the order or he misread the card, and he continued this meltdown after the comp ended and once they were inside the house where Morgan was attempting to calm him down. On the feed, I remember literally on their last nights, Morgan and Vince were just arguing about who knows effing what. And because of this, I do believe it caused them to crash out. And we saw this with Morgan completely choking on part three of the final HOH and Ashley winning it, causing Morgan to be cut by Ashley. And some people claim it's because she and Morgan spent all that last night up arguing when they should have been focused. Morgan is definitely giving the current day Vanessa a decade later with being an emotional mess, very strategic, and being good in the competitions, though a lot of it was in the last third of the season, especially on the competition area. I do think the season will probably be remembered as Morgan losing, and she does have a personality, though there's definitely a sense of desperation many times throughout this season. That was kind of just odd to watch. I do think she will be one of the more memorable things about the season overall once we're distanced. So, when it comes to the questions and speeches, Keanu asks Vince about his horrible jury management due to his emotional manipulation, and Vince mentions that he was not emotionally manipulated, unethical, or poor, but he was just passionate and emotional. Rachel asks Ashley about the specific strategic moves she made that should cause her to be a winner, and Ashley answers about adapting, especially whenever an ally left. So she attached to Morgan and Vince when Zach left. And at that time and time again, and mentioning forming the Judges Alliance. Kelly asks Vince about if his lying and crying was sincere or lying, and Vince mentions that his crying was sincere, since he applied for the show for 10 years, and he wanted people to trust him. Will asks Ashley about her contributions to her personal success in the game, and Ashley mentions that her social game caused her to be covered, which she knew once she was in the final seven that she would make it to the end and formed an alliance with Keanu and Ava. Kenny proposed a final two with her, and Lauren wanted to work with her through Ava. Lauren asks Vince about three game moves that he made that Morgan can't take credit for. He mentions honoring the judges' alliance. I don't think that was a good answer since Morgan's the reason why he honored it, but he mentioned that he had several reasons to not honor it. So he could be protected with the other side he historically worked with as well. He was closer to Zach than Morgan initially, and most of his early it just had nothing to do with her. Ava asks Ashley why she deserves to win over Vince, and Ashley responds by saying that she stuck with strategy and playing an honest game and turning her enemies into friends, while Vince did the opposite in turning friends into enemies. Morgan asks Vince about the strongest part of his game that got him to the end, and Vince mentions his social game as he won 4 HOHs and got a lot of blood on his hands and did a lot of damage control, which his social game helped him do, since everyone became his ally at the end. Ashley's final speech is about entering the house with a mission, but it was halted when she was nominated week one, took herself off the block, and wasn't targeted for 9 weeks afterwards, being in the middle between being the most liked and the least liked, which would cause her to not be targeted, as if you're too liked, you're targeted, if you're too unliked, you're targeted. And she also compared herself to Elle Woods from Legally Blonde, as she is an attorney at a law firm and graduated from a top tier law school. So she hid that and used information to her advantage, and the winner plays the best strategic social game. Vince's final speech is about applying for 10 years, almost making it on last year, and he was going to do everything he could to make it as far as he could here. Came to the house with little confidence, won 4 HOHs, a variety of different competitions, made 14 nominations in the season, nominating over half of the cast. So his game had to be about damage control and being on good terms with everyone. So he could not hide behind or being under the radar. Was nominated 3 times and got off the block 3 different ways. Ashley wins the season in a 6-1 vote. Prince is a lot. I do think he has a lot of the skills to do well in the game, but I think the way he went about it irritated the hell out of me as well as his fellow cast members. He did his best to avoid accountability the entire season and acted like a Karen the entire time. But it ended up with him being more dramatic than I ever thought that he could be. I do think he's kind of the main character of the season due to how involved he was in everything from the beginning to the end, and this could also be the season that is known as how he lost. Ashley is someone that is a decent player who was rough socially at first, but had to improve in that element as the season went on. I don't think she was the most strategic person, but she wasn't doing nothing in that regard, and competitions was not her strong or her main selling point, or something she was very strong at. Personality wise, I did find her to be contrived at some points, but she wasn't someone that bothered me like that, if I'm making sense. So honestly, this video isn't even as long as I thought it was going to be. I think that's just because I don't care for the season much at all. Obviously, I mentioned the formatting issues are huge flaws with the season, with the very long pre-jury phase, the very short jury phase, the blockbuster twist lasting way too long, and a lot of the other twists that they tried to in the season really not working well. In addition to a cast that really just isn't strong, with about 2/3 of them being complete utter duds. And while the last third are good casting choices and are definitely memorable, to me, they aren't enough to make this a good season, in my opinion. I also want to touch up upon something that I forgot to mention in the beginning. So this is supposedly post the diversity rule mandate, where that they got rid of that before the season due to what was happening in politics and by certain people who own the networks that run Big Brother. And as you do see, there's still roughly half of the people who are considered quote unquote people of color. But if you really look at it, you will notice that they have a lot of biracial people, like someone who is half white and half black, someone who is half Asian and half white. Where if you look at them immediately, you wouldn't be able to tell, and they blend in very well with the white cast members. And of course, you have with the Latino people, you have a lot of white Latinos. So it's definitely easier to kind of blur the lines when it comes to the diversity mandate or who's white and who's not. And I think they intentionally made it confusing. And I think that will be something that we have in the future. Though I don't think we'll ever go to the point where we have like 14 White House guests, one Black House guest, and one Asian House guest. I don't think we're going to go back to those days. But I do think the days of the Big Brother 23 to 26 when it comes to the casting is over. We're not going to get 5 people of or 6 people of Black descent and on a season or 3 people of Asian descent. So I don't think we're going to have that. Anyways, that's my thoughts on the season. I'm definitely going to make players tier ranking sooner than later. And then after that, I'm done with the season for good. Thank you all for watching and bearing with me. And yeah, take care.